Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we are going to talk about a topic that I am sure as you as a contractor probably struggle much like I do with, and it is doing the things that we don't do on a daily basis. When it comes to putting in a furnace or a water heater, we're pretty darn good at that. When it comes to managing inventory, making sure we do cycle counts, all of the fancy terms that go along with making sure we have the parts and pieces that we need to complete this job, we struggle. And we work really, really hard, and we try and we try and we try, and we're always making improvements. And we've made some really good ones here recently. But my hope is that today, talking to our guests, we all can get a little better understanding of how this thing works, and potentially tools out there that can help us do it better, more efficiently, and ultimately what our main objective is to make life easier for our field professionals out in the field. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome the CEO and co-founder of Ply, Mr. Dave Wigder. How's it going, Dave?
Good. How are you? Happy to be here.
Awesome. As I was preparing for this, I was combing through the website, listening to, I think you did a podcast not too long ago. Well, you may have recorded it a while ago. I was listening to that, and I was like, I have so many questions. There's no way I'm going to fit this in an hour. So I guess before we get started, maybe give us a little bit of your background, and then maybe we can kind of dovetail that into telling people a little bit more about Ply.
Yeah. I'll give a backstory. Also, my business partner and I, we're family as well. So we're cousins. So a little overlap with our backgrounds, and then that will feed into, how we kick Ply off. So, grew up in Jersey. I actually grew up around the trades. My dad was a mechanic. So, definitely grew up, around a lot of the, customers that we're working with on a daily basis. First one to graduate college, in my family. So went to a small school called Monmouth University right on the Jersey Shore. And my main motivation, honestly, was to graduate, get a degree so I could move out of state. I had some older friends that's what they did, and that just looked so exciting to me. So as soon as I graduated, packed some suitcases and moved out to Southern California. Got my first job in online advertising, where we were working with a lot of SMBs, a lot of contractors on paid placement. And this is when MSN and Yahoo still had skin in the game for search, so quite a while ago. But we were helping contractors just with paid search, being more strategic, helping them grow, that type of thing. Worked there for about 2 years, ended up moving back east. My parents sold their place in Jersey, moved up to Vermont, wanted to find kind of a middle ground where I was closer, but not, living in Vermont. So found a job in Boston in the tech space. And at the time, my business partner / cousin Darian, he was wrapping up his degree from New Hampshire, and he moved to Boston as well. So we landed a handful of different jobs in the startup tech scene in Boston, and he ended up going to HubSpot when HubSpot was early on, so probably 70 or 80 people. And on the HubSpot platform, we actually kicked off a blog called The Service Coach. We were used to selling to SMBs and trades contractors, so really to give back. And this is when inbound marketing was still just a buzzword, kind of in its infancy. Kicked off the blog, and, we were really just giving back top 10 tips on how to manage a pay-per-click campaign, how to think about local SEO, that type of stuff. And before we knew it, we started to get people reaching out, wanting us to help them, right? And took on a couple customers on the side, which led to more customers. And before we knew it, we were able to generate enough revenue to basically go all in. And that's when we quit our jobs, started a little agency called The Service Coach, where we're really helping contractors with everything from pay-per-click management to SEO to blogging, landing page building. That agency evolved over time. We started to take on website projects, which led to e-commerce. And before we knew it, we're essentially a boutique full-service marketing agency. So what started just for the trades, we started to have all kinds of different types of customers, grew that to a certain point, and ended up just selling it to a bigger version of ourselves. After that, held product and design roles at a handful of different tech companies. And then fast forward to about 3 years ago, that's when Darian, my cousin, and we started to throw around ideas for new businesses. I was at Amazon on the last mile technology team, and he was at a consumer fintech company called Stash in the New York area. And we knew we wanted to work with contractors again, but we were trying to figure out what it was going to be. And, one thing that we would always see working with contractors in the past, they would get to a certain point in growth, whether it's like 1 million or 2 million in revenue, and things would just start to plateau. So we had a hypothesis going in, or all around cash flow predictability. What keeps these contractors up at night when it comes to cash flow, but we also didn't want to, we wanted to tackle something vertical that we could really sink our teeth into. If we didn't want to compete directly with, the service titans of the world and build a FSM, right? We wanted to really find something that we could go really deep with, and so did a bunch of customer interviews, customer development, just to kind of understand what keeps these contractors up at night. And one thing that stood out to us pretty quickly was the percentage of revenue that goes to material spend. We're talking to contractors where 20, sometimes 30, or even 35% of their revenue is going back to material spend. And we would look at those numbers and then look at how they're managing materials, not only like the lack of visibility in the warehouse and the trucks, but also the fragmentation on the purchasing side. And that's where we feel like we, really found our category of materials management. So built out some of the product, raised a small round of funding, and then quit our jobs and went all in and started on the purchasing side, really procurement software to help streamline communications between contractors and their suppliers, and then generate some traction, but then shortly after launched the inventory piece. And that's what told that full story of, know what you have, or inventory becomes that data source, right? And then once you have that data source in place, now you can make those better decisions. So that's where the story of know what you have, know what you need, and then know where to get it from kind of came in. And so from there, launched the product across those two major pillars. So on the inventory side, giving contractors full visibility of what's in stock in the warehouse, in the trucks, tracking movement of materials, which is really important, not only across stock locations, but stock location to job for job costing and things like that. And then on the purchasing side, really streamlining communications between them and their suppliers, making sure that when POs are generated, we're capturing that data back in and centralizing all that back into one system, especially when it comes to pricing volatility, making sure pricing updates are captured back in. And then through our integrations with some of the major FSMs, we're able to automatically adjust those prices back into their price book. Fast forward to now, we have about 320 customers. I would say probably 60% HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and then we have a variety of trades outside of that. And, we started on the SMB side, but we're definitely starting to move a little bit more upstream. Private equity rollouts, franchise rollouts, just because we found that these problems compound over time. Whereas you look at SMB that has 2 million in revenue and 3 trucks, for them, they're thinking proactively about the problem. They're like, how do I get ahead? I'm seeing the cracks. How do I get ahead of this before it becomes a much bigger problem? But then on the, 20, 30, 40 plus trucks, it's a huge pain point, right? And you're having to solve this problem retroactively. And at that point, it's a process change as much as it is a software change. So that's where we're at now, up to some really cool things with incorporating AI. There's a big play right now where we're pushing hard on the supplier side because, a lot of these distributors are trying to build value outside of price and build that stickiness. And so they're launching these VMI and consignment programs, which is something that we're trying to align ourselves with because we have that customer data. But otherwise, venture-backed business, raised a few rounds of funding, probably going to go out and raise another round of funding in the next 3 to 6 months. But yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I now hearing all of the things that you do, I thought I knew, and now I've got a whole lot more questions, because this is the one thing that perplexes me, in all the inventory, procurement, all of this stuff. Like, it is not my cup of tea, but I'm going to try to understand it today.
Yep.
At least though I can hopefully be a better leader and have a little bit more insight. But let's start at the procurement side. It sounds like that's where you guys kind of started your business. So tell me a little bit about how, like, if I'm a contractor and I introduce Ply to the business, how is that going to make life easier when it comes to buying material from a distributor?
Yeah, so it's really making sure that those activities are centralized in one place. We found that the smaller contractors, they're purchasing from many suppliers, right? So they're not building that buying power. And then the larger contractors, there's many people purchasing. So even if you're purchasing from 2-3 suppliers, you have many people purchasing. You have purchasing managers, warehouse managers making purchases. You have last minute supply runs, right? Because you don't have that data to know what's running low beforehand to be more proactive. So, it's more than just a streamlining comms between them and the supplier. It's also the internal efficiencies to make sure like you're using data to make those better decisions and to be as proactive as possible. But on the supplier side, there is that component of like, if you're sending out a PO from your email, that's lost in that email. So if that person left and that buying power and a lot of that historical data is packaged up in the email, it's not centralized in one place, right? So a big kind of value add that we have there is making sure that any activities that go out from Ply, we're pulling that data back in. So you send out a purchase order, a supplier responds back. They don't even need to respond back in our platform. They could just send a PDF purchase order back. We're transcribing data off of that PO and centralizing all that data back into our system. So it's really all about centralization. And once you have the data all in one place, then you could start to use that data to your advantage and make those better decisions, right? Whether it be, being more proactive on the replenishment side. Maybe you could get to the point where for the majority of the stock that you're going to be buying on a daily basis, just make bulk purchases, which is going to unlock discounts, obviously, from the supplier, but it's also going to prevent billable hours being spent in the field making those last minute supply runs. So there's a lot of like those internal efficiencies of just having all this information live in one place. And then you add, potential AI opportunities on top of that where, using voice to create field requests and, transcribing data off of receipts. If they are making those last minute purchases in the field, at least you're able to capture that purchasing back into the platform. There's a lot of those like ancillary use cases that start to pop up on a daily basis.
Yeah. I guess one of the things or one of the issues that we have is sourcing stuff. So,
Yeah.
we have our main suppliers, but we've got 11 locations across 3 states. So we have a centralized procurement team that lives in Indianapolis. All of the purchasing comes through them. They make the purchase. Does Ply help with any of the like sourcing this part? I think it's probably more apt on like HVAC parts where like I got to get this part from this. Maybe there's 2 vendors that could maybe get it, but I need to find the one that's closest, the one that has the best price. Like, does this Ply help in any of that regard?
Yeah, we don't. We usually rely on the existing relationships with your suppliers. We do have RFQ functionality where you could kind of look at side by side comparisons on pricing and things like that. We're also going to be launching smart suppliers, which is going to during PO creation. If you have a preferred supplier attached to like a certain category of parts, but we find a cheaper supplier that you're out there, it's already in the system that you should be purchasing from, kind of meeting you in the middle as you're creating that PO to kind of unlock potential discounts and things like that. We do see an opportunity to start to get to the point where we have like preferred partner suppliers that we're working directly with. And that's kind of the next evolution of Ply is, we've been going direct to contractor to date. But now that we have purchase volume, we have a ton of data and we have data that suppliers want. Now we could start to build those relationships on the supply side to have this concept of like preferred suppliers, right? Where if you're usually used to purchasing from your own suppliers, if we have a match in our system when you're creating a PO or something's running low in that automated replenishment list, we could potentially tee up new suppliers for you. So that's definitely the direction we're going. And, obviously it does require, us to get the attention on the supply side, which does take time and also, integrate. There's integration opportunities there, which also take time, but it's definitely the direction that we want to go is now that we feel like we're in a good spot solving those problems at the contractor level. How can we, bring it even further at the supplier level as well?
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do this. I think I just explained kind of our situation. Obviously, that's not the situation for a lot of people. I remember when we were smaller, we just sell a new system. The pictures and the material list and everything came to me. And then I would make phone calls to our suppliers and, hey, I need one of these. I need one of these. Oh, shoot, you're out of these. I'll have to call somebody else. Essentially that was, and eventually they had online ordering where you could just go online and you could place your order and that was good there. if I'm a smaller contractor, again, as we talk, wearing a lot of hats, doing all the stuff, I'm ordering materials that my sales guy just sold. Like, am I living in ply, or is that just helping me? Like, kind of walk me through that scenario that I just explained. Like, what is the contractor doing, or
Yeah.
how does it make it hopefully streamline the process?
Yeah, so for us, really having that baseline of stock is where you really start at. So having visibility of what's in the warehouse and what's in the trucks is key, because once you have that data in place, each stock location in Ply has its own rolling automated replenishment list. So we have smart mins and maxes where we use AI to basically automatically adjust mins and maxes over time based on historical data. So once those mins get hit, it's not only just the warehouse that's running on a replenishment list, it's each truck stock location as well. So each stock, we look at everything as a stock location. So each stock location is its own kind of mini control hub, right? So depending on the use case, if you're a contractor, it's all about interacting with your truck on like things like material to job allocation, where, that's where integration with the FSMs come into play. So ServiceTitan, House Call Pro, and Java, you're scanning those materials out, and then you could allocate it to a job you're assigned to. We automatically pull in, right? For back office, like warehouse managers, purchasing managers, if the owner's still kind of managing this process, it's all about the movement material. So making those transfers and those pick lists from warehouse to truck so the techs have what they need. But also, managing replenishment as a whole and managing those field requests as a whole. If the tech is out in the field, they're putting together field requests, sending it to the back office. Someone needs to manage that, right? So Ply ends up, even though we are integrated with ServiceTitan, House Call Pro, and Java, Ply ends up becoming a source of truth for all things materials and purchasing. And then we make sure to feed the data back to the FSM, especially the data that matters. So material to job allocation data, where you're scanning out what you're using. That data ends up back on the invoice, back into, a service time, for example. Same thing with price book data. So we're capturing, when you send out a PO and a PO comes back from the supplier, we're capturing that pricing data back in. That data is pushing automatically back to the FSM. So there's a lot of different use cases. They're definitely split between like field use, like the field tech is really using us as a tool to share that responsibility of material tracking in the field. Whereas like the admin use cases are all about running usage reports, movement reporting, managing replenishment lists, managing field requests, and then also managing their suppliers and purchase orders back and forth for their entire purchasing workflow.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is how do we make this easier on the field techs? Like they signed up to work on furnaces, and yet we make them also be a warehouse attendant, a purchasing agent, a dispatcher sometimes, call center. Like we're asking to do all these things, and it's our real philosophy that anything we can do to make their life simpler, we will do anything and everything so that they can go be the best version of themselves for the customer.
Exactly.
And it sounds like what you guys are trying to accomplish is just that. Like, how do we create one centralized hub so that everybody's speaking the same language, and we're not, we're using like Teams and different stuff like that to send orders in. And it's like, this is the clunkiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, surely we can come up with something better.
Yeah, well, I mean, Darren and I talk about this all the time. We have a big theme on like, how do we make tracking near invisible to the tech, to the point where we have some prototypes we're building out right now using voice AI, where the tech doesn't even need to go into the software. They could either text or call a number, like a dedicated Ply number, and text what they need, right? And then the next evolution of that, how can we get to the point where they're not even going into ServiceTitan and adding materials to the invoice, or going into Ply and, scanning out materials they're using. They're just calling the number or texting saying, hey, I use, material 123 on job 123 Main Street, right? So there's so many opportunities to kind of, make things near invisible to them. Because like we still have customers where the techs are still relying on text and voice, right? And for those customers, obviously the main goal there is to have them kind of ramp up on the technology, but we do have it set up in a way where they don't need to use the software in the field. We do have a bi-directional relationship with the field service management platforms that we integrate with. So as long as materials end up on the invoice in the FSM, we could deduct those counts, not only from inventory, but from the specific truck the tech's assigned to. So we do have some like backup in place, but, it is one of those things where, you're going to see a lot of added benefits if you have the tech share that responsibility, but you need to make it as seamless as possible. You can't force them to just adopt this new technology when they don't fully understand like how it's going to like be fitting into the business, right? And we see some creativity where, you can run cycle counts in Ply, and we've seen people add cycle count bonus incentives where every quarter, every month, they'll have the techs do cycle count using Ply, and based on how accurate the cycle count is. So we have a score that basically spits out, and based on how accurate it is, they'll give the tech a bonus incentive, right? So there are some like motivational levers that we've seen customers use, but at the end of the day, it is a holistic problem that needs to be solved. And we are tackling it by just making it as simple as possible. So the tech in the field using Ply, like it's really bare bones, right? They're only just interacting with their truck. They're not interacting with all the admin permission level features that we have. It's really, them interfacing with their truck. But even so, like it's still, a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about cycle counts. So I think this is a thing, we've got, I think at this point, almost 300 trucks on the road. So doing cycle counts makes my head spin a touch. But like, how does Ply make that easier? I know there's some barcode technology and different stuff like that. Like how are you guys kind of tackling that?
Yeah, we have advanced settings on the cycle counts where you can basically set it up where it's only 25% of stock, or you could say I only want certain categories of stock cycle counted, or you could do it based on price bands. So if you want everything that's like $30 and above cycle counted, because all materials tracked in Ply pull from the catalog, so pricing is visible to all materials, whether they're in stock or not in stock. So you could basically say, anything $30 to $100 on one cycle counted. So there are some ways to kind of speed things up, but it is one of those things where it's tricky because like you have to figure out the right time to do it. It's different when you have 3 trucks versus 300 trucks, right? Because you almost need to stagger it out or like, is it a weekend thing where you buy them lunch and kind of, so there's definitely some logistical things that need to be figured out. But we try to make it as simple as possible, especially with those advanced settings where you don't have to cycle count everything. Or you can like split up maybe the senior tech cycle count just certain percentages of things, and maybe the more green techs, they're cycle counting everything until they get to the point where they're in a much more accurate percentage on what Ply says versus what their actual count says.
For sure. So I guess what would be good, maybe insight, is if anybody is, in kind of my shoes of, this being kind of a foreign thing, and how do we do this efficiently? And God, I really don't want to focus on this. I know it can save me money, but it just seems like a thing. Well, I guess from your customers, like, you said you had a little over, I think, 300 and some odd customers right now. Like, what kind of feedback are you getting from them of like, hey, these are like oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, what are some of the things that you're hearing from your customers? And I guess maybe I think that'll give like listeners a little bit of insight into like, what could this solve for, or what could be a problem that I don't even know is a problem.
Totally. Yeah. And the 3 main value props we try to align ourselves with, one is just full visibility. And usually that's where the admin time savings comes in. So if we could kind of create those efficiencies and make sure data is flowing into one place, that's going to save, admin hours, 5 to 10 hours per week per whoever's handling this, right? Purchasing managers, service managers, ops managers, whoever, warehouse managers, whoever it may be. The other one that has been coming up a lot recently, especially as we move more upstream, is the billable hours problem. When we talk to customers and we're, doing discovery calls, we try to understand like what keeps you up at night. And one of the big problems is like, I don't want my techs going to supply house, like they're mid job and they're going to supply house. And, if you have 10 techs and each tech is making 2 to 3 supply house runs, which we hear per week, which we hear all the time, right? And each one of those runs is taking upwards of like 30 minutes to an hour, and you multiply that across the number of techs over the course of a year. And that's, potentially 6 figures of lost revenue by not having your techs be more billable, right? And then the last piece, just through like general visibility, is dead stock. that's that, we do on-site services as well, where we go on site and help customers get set up, where we basically spend time with them. We'll do initial counts in the warehouse, get things barcoded side by side with them, and then do a lot of training in person. And just through that alone, we'll identify tens of thousands of dollars of just dead stock, right? Or potential stock that is eligible for like buyback programs from suppliers. So those are kind of those three buckets of value props that we try to align ourselves with. And I think what determines success versus, maybe a little bit more slower to implement is having that internal champion. And usually that champion, this is why, we try to, we start to see the problems or start to see a lot of value with contractors where they have like 3 or 4 trucks and up, right? Because at that point, even if it's an office manager that's kind of wearing a bunch of different hats, like office manager slash wife of the business or warehouse manager, as they're the champion, and having that internal champion really makes or breaks like how successful this is going to be. Because, as I mentioned before, it's a process change as much as it is a software change. And so you almost need to form a process around what you're trying to do, and then Ply is going to complement that process. So, having that internal champion, we hear that all the time from customers like, hey, just like we've been slowly implementing, but we just hired a warehouse manager and things are like really picking up. We want to add on 5 more trucks, right? Because some people they'll start a little smaller and just kind of get things in a good spot and then ramp up from there. So by far, I think that's one of the most important pieces is understanding it is a process change, and then having that internal champion help drive that process forward is invaluable.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Tell me a little bit more about this barcoding thing. So, and maybe you can help me. It's probably something stupid that's just a roadblock for me that I can't figure out. But in pretty much all the trade lines, it would be great if everything was in a nice, 4x4 box that we could put a little barcode on, and it'd be great. But a lot of the stuff we use, as you know, is small, and it's fittings and connectors and this and that. Like, how do you guys work to solve? And it may be one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the crappy part of some of the stuff. But what's your how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it is a hard part, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. Like, obviously, if it's fittings, you throw them into a bin for same-size fittings and create a Ply barcode and slap the barcode right on the bin, right? Or for the trucks, a lot of our techs, they prefer to just print out a binder of Ply barcodes that represent all the SKUs in their truck, so they're not, trying to crawl around their truck and scan things in and out. They just have this binder where they're scanning, things in and out. So there's a lot of that. I think for us, we also have a many to one barcode to material relationship. So you could have many barcodes. So if you have existing manufacturer barcodes on boxes and things, you could import those into Ply. So we're not trying to recreate the wheel. We could import those in. You could still use those to kind of track materials in and out. The other thing we have is kitting. So you can build kits in Ply. So for those common install jobs, like an install kit, I think ServiceTitan calls these assemblies. You could basically create a kit, and it tracks to one main barcode to transfer that entire kit. But if you still want to track the individual items, so let's say you transfer a kit from warehouse to truck and not everything in the kit got used, you could scan the leftovers back into stock. So even though it is a kit with 10 materials and you're scanning at the kit level to make that transfer or make the pick list transfer from warehouse to truck, if you do have leftovers, you still have the ability to scan the leftover materials back into stock using a binder or whatever it may be. But yeah, it is difficult. We try to make it as simple as possible. We also have direct integrations with Brother mobile solutions, where just with one click of a button, you could print off a label in real time. So, when we do on-sites or for our larger customers, we'll ship out, handful of Brother printers for them to kind of create those barcodes. But I think it really starts with organization, making sure that things are binned up properly. To your point, some of those fittings, they do get out of hand, but they're also pretty expensive in regards to the potential value you have in stock of them, right? So making sure they're organized in a certain way, usually using bins and things like that, definitely help on the organization front. We're not magicians. There is a level of organization that does need to happen, and that kind of rolls up to that kind of process. It is a process change, right? Once that organization is in place, and you have a number of different options at your disposal to make sure that, okay, now how are we going to track this stuff in and out?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, we talked a little bit about the technician, about how, he can, kind of utilize Ply to make his job easier. Is there any other things that Ply does that you would say, yeah, this is going to make your tech's life a hell of a lot easier than it is today?
Yeah, I think the material to job allocation is really interesting. So a lot of times, especially for service tying customers, they're going in at the invoice level and one by one adding materials that they're using in the field. Once they see how easy it is to do and apply, because like if you think about it, it's almost like building a checkout cart, like on Amazon, for example. They're just scanning off of a binder what they're using and then just choosing the job that we automatically pull in. And we only pull in jobs assigned to that specific tech. All they have to do is choose that job and click one button, and those materials transfer back to the invoice and Service Titan. So once they see, like, it's like those small things, once they see how easy it is to use, they're like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. Like, I'm already doing this anyway in the field using Service Titan, but now I could use Ply instead, and there's integration in place, and it's way easier to do that tracking, right? And that's where those benefits start to come into play of keeping track of like potential dead stock, right? Like if you're transferring 10 materials to a truck but only 6 of them get used, a lot of times that those 4 leftovers sit as dead stock on the truck, and now you're replenishing back into the warehouse materials you already have on the truck. You just don't have that visibility, right? So that's definitely one of the key value props for them. I think the other one is just visibility, right? They're on the job, they identified the problem on the job site. They could just look into their truck inventory and see right then and there what their live stock is, right? Or if they don't have something, but another tech is down the street doing another job, they could actually, you can give them permissions to see what the stock availability, kind of view-only stock availability is of that truck. Or the warehouse. They could say, yeah, I don't have these on the truck, but I'm only a couple miles from the warehouse. I could just drive back to the warehouse and pick it up in the warehouse versus make that supply run, right? And buy materials that are already in stock. So there's that element. And then the big other piece that we're going to start to really throw, as I mentioned, voice AI on is field requests. So if they don't have what they need and they need to make that field request while they're in the field, being able to use text or voice to make those requests. So that's something we're working on now is how can we utilize AI to meet techs where they're at so they don't have to jump into the software. They could just kind of operate how they're already used to operating. Like we ran a survey the other day where 60% of the time techs are texting field requests, or that's how they're communicating with back office as they're in the field as it relates to materials. So, if we could kind of meet them where they're at, so they're not having to jump into a platform, that's fine with us. But the benefit of back office is all that data is still flowing into our platform.
Yeah. Is there any, and this may be like on your roadmap or something you thought about, or hell, maybe it does it already. I think the one thing for our procurement team that would be super beneficial. So typically the way our process works is if let's just use an HVAC tech, I diagnose the system, it needs a new blower motor. And because our procurement team they aren't technicians. So essentially we make the tech, before he even sells the thing, he's got to find it somewhere in the city. Like it's not a truck stock item. He doesn't have it in stock. It's a specialized motor that we're not going to carry on the truck. We're just going to go get from wherever. So we make him kind of call around. Well, I'm sure you've seen distributors. I love all our distributors. They're great people. However, they got a lot of people calling them. So they may wait on hold. Then you've got the variable of the counter rep, who may not know exactly what they're talking about. And so you've got all of these variables. So he finds it. He then has to go into the customer and say, hey, would you like to buy this blower motor? And they say, yeah. And then he has to send that to procurement. And he sent, this is where it's at. They've got one, so on and so forth. Order it for me. And then tell me, do I need to go pick it up or going to send it out to me, whatever it is. So it's a very like we started to measure the time and we're like, this could take 30 minutes just to get a part. So is there any how do you guys think about like solving that piece of the puzzle of like finding these parts and then being able to procure them?
That's the next evolution of Ply. As I said, this is where supplier relationships come in, right? And the benefit of us is we have the customer data. So being able to align ourselves, especially with these like VMI consignment programs to start, that's going to allow us visibility at the territory level. what the supplier has in stock at any given time. So right now we're actually building integration with a large distributor where that's how we're going to build it out, where not only are we going to have the customer data for existing VMI and consign customers, but also we're going to have like the local availability data at the supplier level, right? And we kind of pair those things because, like, if you think about it, we're in this weird inflection point where, contractors aren't wanting to like build a e-commerce checkout with like 100 items in it for things that they need, right? Like that's just like it's going to be a while before that starts to happen, right? But there is like this gap between that and like the traditional, I'm just going to make a phone call or text my supplier or email my supplier. And that's where like this system to system communication is going to come in, right? And if Ply can pull the data over here to say this is available and pull the data from the customer side and say this is what's needed, that's where we could kind of pair those two things together. And that's, where we see a huge opportunity now that we have the data on the contractor side. We're building value with them, now tapping into the supplier side to kind of get that visibility from the suppliers to kind of pair those two things together. So it's going to be a big push for us. We have a couple pilots right now. We're mid integration with a handful of suppliers, but that when we raise our next round of funding, a lot of that money is going to be spent building out those workflows and building out those partnerships on the supply side. Because without them, it's going to be hard to gain that visibility. You know what I mean? So it's still going to benefit the contractor. That's always going to be our main goal, is to provide as much value to the contractor as possible. But if we can do that through partnerships with suppliers and make that value even better, that's one of the kind of key goals for us.
Yeah, I mean, that would be huge. If I'm a contractor and I can say, hey, these are the 4 main suppliers that I go to for this stuff, and a technician's right there. He's got the blower motor in front of him with the serial number. He punches it in and it shows him, hey, yeah, there's one within 5 miles. It's here. Okay, perfect. And that gets shot over to procurement. They can start getting stuff ready. And we can it's crazy to think about, like, you're trying to cut out literally minutes of a process so that a tech can be like super efficient. We started adding them up and we're like, yeah, like I said, it's going to be half an hour just to like procure a, $120 part. Like there's got to be a better way, but you're right. Totally. It's that connection between the contractor. And I think too, a lot of contractors have put pressure on these distributors because there's a lot bigger companies now that are looking at problems. There's software like yours that makes our job easier. And then we look at the distributor and we're like, you guys are like back in like 94. Like, come on, man. Like you're still printing off on the paper with the dots on the side, ripping those things off. Like we gotta, come on, let's move on.
I mean, even on the VMI consignment side, it's one of those things where it's still pretty manual, right? Like they might have like a full-time staff. Like not sure if you guys have like staff VMI consignment, but or you're doing VMI where a rep is coming out and counting shelves, right, and putting together orders on a monthly basis based on pretty stale mins and maxes that aren't fluctuating over time, and so tons of opportunities, but like these distributors, they're not tech companies, so it's hard, right? Because like they're also trying to make their own margins and they're trying to build that value outside of price, but they're not built like tech companies, right? And I think that's what's caught their attention, especially with us, is like if we have the customer data and they have this layer on the other side where they could see what's running low across their customer base, and then we also get the data from whatever they're using on the ERP side or inventory side for availability, we could start to pair all these things together, and that's where we pretty much become a hub between what's needed and what's available in the local area.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dave, I know we're kind of running up on time here, and I want to be respectful of that. I guess 2 last things that I think would be beneficial to listeners, because I think everybody's thinking like, okay, I don't know the first thing about this. Like, what's this look like? Tell me a little bit about like, okay, I think this can benefit us. What does kind of like onboarding for a customer look like?
Yeah. We phase it out depending on the size of customer, especially if it's like mid-market and above. As I mentioned, we offer on-site services, but really phase 1 is building out the catalog, whether that be reusing data from the existing price book, or a lot of times, we work with customers where they have like 10,000 or 20,000 items in their price book. And the next question we ask is, how many SKUs out of the 10,000 you're using, and they might say 800 to 1,200 SKUs, right? So depending on how clean the price book is, we could reuse a lot of that data. Or what we've done a lot is have our customers reach out to their suppliers and pull usage reports, right? And we'll build out the catalog based on the usage reports. And the benefit of that is now all the materials being tracked in their catalog, there's a one-to-one communication layer between what you're calling them or what your suppliers are calling them. So when you're sending out POs, there's not these questions of like, what did you mean here, right? And then there's a back and forth because there's already that common language there. But either way, that's the first step, is to build out the catalog, right? And if we do come on site, obviously we help with that, because the on-site audit helps us capture outside the usage reports what other materials do we need to account for and create barcodes for and that type of thing. So step one is getting the data in a good place. Step two is the audit. So once the catalog's built out and we have a general understanding for the materials that they're touching, that's where you need to understand like what the quantities are, not only in the warehouse but across the trucks as well. So this is the step where it's like we do come on site and help as much as we can with this, but this is the biggest list, right? So when you ask me like what's the biggest challenge for implementation, it's taking the time to run those cycle counts, to your point, to identify what those baseline stock levels are. Because the third step is now building in the logic. That's setting up mins and maxes, things like that, setting up your suppliers, getting them all in the system. And then the fourth step is now that all the data is in a good place, now we'll make sure that if there are opportunities, so we do integrate with a handful of suppliers right now. So if there are opportunities to build out those supplier integrations, we'll do so. We'll get people locked in on those. Otherwise, it's making sure that we're kind of dialing up and cleaning up the data as much as possible. So end to end, if it's like a 5 to 10 truck customer, it could take anywhere from like 30 days or less. If it's larger, usually we see more like incremental rollouts. So like even if it's like a larger private equity, for example, where there's like hundreds of trucks, we might start with plumbing department at one of the larger branch locations, right? And start with those like 50 trucks and then ramp up from there. So we try to meet customers where they're at as much as possible, and we're very hands-on. We know this is not one of those problems that you could just like throw software at it and the next day you're seeing value. So we have a full customer success team that is really hand-holding customers throughout the process to make sure that we're getting them to value as fast as possible. But that's kind of general 4 stages of implementation. And, as I mentioned, the biggest lift is identifying what that baseline stock level is against the catalog.
That's awesome. Well, good stuff, Dave. Again, I will probably be following up with you after this conversation to figure out if we've got, I'm sure we've got some areas that we can improve. We've got a great team. It's just like you don't know what you don't know. And totally. Trying to connect the dots is sometimes hard because, they've never been in the field, and it's trying to create this like relationship where everybody's helping everybody, not like, oh, well, the tech did it wrong, so we can't do our job. And it like trying to bridge that gap so that everybody's working together, I think is important.
Absolutely.
Dave, what's the best way? Like if people are interested in learning more about this, if it could help them, what's like the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, getply.com is our website. We also have a YouTube channel. I believe it's Ply Inventory. So we have a bunch of videos in there. My business partner Darren's in warehouses a lot, obviously, because we do these on site. So he recorded a hands-on training in the warehouse. There's product tutorials, things like that. But yeah, getply.com. That's our main website. You could book a demo. We try to take a more consultative approach because again, this is the pain really needs to be felt to create that motivation to adopt something like this. So we try to uncover like where those pain points are and take a more consultative approach on the demos that we offer.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, I really appreciate the time. I know I've learned a lot. I've got a lot of notes here that I'm going to take back to the team. And I'm sure listeners have gained some knowledge into, again, like we said at the outset, it may be an issue that you don't know what you don't know. And you may be losing money and it may be going out the door and you're just not sure. And I think this is a really cool product that could help people kind of recapture some of that revenue that they've generated but yet they're losing out the bottom of that funnel. So really appreciate the time. Thanks a lot. Listeners, definitely check this out. If inventory and procurement is an issue for you, I'm going to guess it maybe is. I haven't met anybody that they're like, yeah, we are the masters at this. But yeah, really appreciate the time, and thanks for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG arena. As always, keep growing out there.